This episode is brought to you by Red Riding Hood, the manga-inspired take on the classic fairy tale for readers grades K through 2, written by Christina Oxtra. In Red Riding Hood, readers review the classic story in a brand new way, with twists in the story, more diverse characters, and featuring Japanese aesthetics incorporated throughout. Red Riding Hood is part of a series published by Capstone and written by various artists with unique takes on your childhood favorites. Look out for Red Riding Hood, available on Amazon and your local bookstores. Congratulations, Christine, on your first published book. The link is in the show description.
Hello everyone, and welcome to 1v1 with Boss Rush Games. I'm your host, Celeste Roberts of Nintendo Palblock and Another Zelda podcast. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Kimchica, Communications Manager at Rose City Games and a cozy indie game streamer. Good afternoon, or good morning for you.
Yeah, we're on that cusp of morning into afternoon, so yeah, I hope you're having a good day.
Yes, I am. How about you?
Pretty good. You know, it's nice to have this as like a little break. And then it's the middle of my workday right now, so it's a really nice way to sort of just let my mind relax a little bit, just have a nice conversation.
Oh, well, thank you so much for making time. Time is really valuable for everybody, so I appreciate your making the time for us to share your story and let people get to know you a little better.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I love what y'all do. I mean, with the panel that we did, oh gosh, time is so weird because I'm like, it feels like forever ago, but it was not that long ago.
I think it was July, I think.
Yeah, and so it's been really cool, like getting to listen to that, and then all the 1v1 stuff that you've been doing it's really, I think, a nice way to highlight just different folks in the industry. So happy to be here.
Yes, I love it. I love learning about people. I was a freelance writer for a local magazine, and I got to interview local people. So I'm really thankful for technology and the ability to do this virtually. And yes, everyone, like she said, she was on our women's panel in July. That was a lot of fun. And now we get to have more focus on Kimchica today. And she also goes by Jenny.
Yeah, and either one works for me. It was interesting because when I started getting online and creating content, before I was even working in the industry, I was very, very wary about having my real name be something that people knew. And so for quite some time, I only went by Kimchica. I was like very secretive about my name. But then I started working in the industry, and that just kind of gradually evolved into me being a little bit more okay with my real name being out there, mostly because it was interesting to see how social media became more of like a work thing for me, and networking thing for me, versus just me posting, like, I don't really post memes, but just me posting about things that I liked and like random stuff. So it's been really interesting just thinking about how my use of technology, especially now that I'm in the game space, has evolved.
Yeah, it is interesting how it's now a tool for business rather than just letting people know where you are, like it was in the early days. You probably also had MySpace back in the day.
I did, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so wild. Yeah, the when you could like add music to your page so everyone knew what mood you were in. Yeah, oh my goodness, MySpace. Yeah, I was definitely a MySpace kid. I had a live journal. Like I did all of that. Wrote lots of fan fiction. So yeah, it's been interesting just seeing, we've moved from using social media as this like sort of side hobby friend tool, and it's now like the way I interact with people at work. It's the way that I interact with people as I'm networking through the industry and getting to know folks, and it's provided me job opportunities. Like it's wild.
That is awesome. That's really lucky, and that's really cool. So what inspired the name Kimchica? Is it a nickname you had growing up or anything?
So For when I was coming up with the name, for the longest time, I was actually Chipmunky.
Oh, that's
I love
cute.
chipmunks and I love monkeys, and so I was like, I'm gonna be Chipmunky. But I wanted something that felt a little like it's so cute, but I wanted something that was like not tied to like my Neopets account or things like
Hmm.
that. And so my favorite food of all time is kimchi, and that is like a fermented spicy vegetable dish from Korea. And I'm half Korean and like really really proud of that part of my identity, and really just like I grew up really celebrating that, and I was fortunate enough that my mom like really fostered our knowledge of Korean culture and like made sure that we kind of knew where we came from on that side of the family. And so I wanted that part of me to also be captured in whatever handle that I picked. I love that kimchi is also like a little bit spicy, but it doesn't have to be. And for me, that's kind of nice because while I'm not the spiciest memer online, it's I feel like there's a little bit more than generally people will assume at first glance. And so the idea of kimchi and being able to like sort of celebrate that part of my identity was really important to me.
Wow.
And then I just kind of added a few letters at the end to make it sound a little bit more like a name and not just the food.
Oh, it's really cute. And I love kimchi as well. Do you cook it a lot or ferment? Do you make it a lot?
Yeah, I not as much this year. I kind of fell off the boat a little bit this year in terms of making it at home. I've been buying it now, which is like not as cool. But I do love to make kimchi. My favorite is like cucumber kimchi, where you can pretty much, a lot of people are more familiar with like the radish and cabbage versions, but pretty much any vegetable can be made into kimchi. So my
Oh.
personal favorite is cucumber kimchi, and it's just like really refreshing. And now I'm getting hungry.
Wow. Okay. I've only had the cabbage form. I didn't know that you could make it out of pretty much whatever you like. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
it's awesome. I remember when I lived in Korea as a little kid, and then again in college because I studied at university there. And I really loved going. There's a kimchi museum, and so they like go into all the history and all the details, and there are just hundreds and hundreds of types of kimchi. So it's like definitely a national pastime for Korea.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that. I see. I had no
yeah.
idea. So, what was your professional background? Did you study in the United States as well as Korea or just
Yeah.
Korea?
No, I studied in the US. I went to like a really, really small college here, studied at through an exchange program at Yonsei University when I was over there, and spent a little bit of time just like backpacking in New Zealand for a month. So my higher education was pretty like grounded in the US, but I spent a lot of time, fortunately, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time traveling. And it was really nice to be able to live in Korea for that time and like spend time with family there, which we tried to visit as often as we could, but like unfortunately now we can't. And so I'm just like really happy I did get that time when I was a little younger. But yeah, most of my background, like before games, was in education. So I taught middle school and high school for quite some time in near Oregon, where I live currently, but as well as Alaska. So it's been like a really interesting transition moving from someone who's in the educational sphere, working and building communities in school, in the classroom, and teaching kids, and kind of doing the same thing online. I work at Rose City Games now, which is an indie studio, and I'm the communications manager. And a lot of that also encompasses like fostering community as well. So it's all kind of blends together in a nice way.
That's really cool because when
Yeah.
you're younger and people are asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's
Mhm.
very linear. It like if you say, oh, I'm going to medical school, oh, I'm going to law school,
Mhm.
that's what you picture people doing. But it's cool to see you blending education with community management in the virtual
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, I think it's been really wonderful because a lot of folks will ask like, "Oh, how do you go into community or how do you get into games?" And what I found is it's such a winding path for a lot of people. I think perhaps people coming up nowadays have a little bit more of that direct access because the jobs have already sort of been created. They're a bit more normalized now. But even like a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, like community managers weren't really a thing. Like they were there, but not to the degree that they are now. I think now it's a lot more like it's more prominently known and accepted that for games and for studios, you need someone to help foster that community and to help with stuff that isn't the direct development of the game. And it's really interesting because, like, again, when I was moving into this space, I think a lot of us were kind of still just creating those positions, and we're still defining them even now together because they're so new. So having things like an education background has served really well because it provides context and just like an additional depth of knowledge on how like people work and communities work and how people learn. That's, you know, I don't know if they teach that. I think they have community management like degrees now, which is really interesting. But I wonder like how they teach that. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, because it sounds like it's one of those quote unquote soft skills. Like, how do you quantify this on paper, like a math
Right.
equation?
Right.
Like that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like a lot of times people will and not invalidate, but they'll look down a little bit on those softer skills because they are harder to quantify, which doesn't make them any less important, just because it's a little bit harder to define. So I think it's really exciting to see more and more people focusing on that and understanding that it is really needed in the game space because I think there are some examples of games and spaces in the gaming industry where community has been perhaps neglected or not as focused on or fostered. And there is a very distinct difference in tone and the way that people interact with one another and how people treat one another in those spaces versus one that has maybe more dedicated time and attention to making sure community is a priority.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, as you're saying, that some people look down upon on softer skills. Think about it, and you were an educator. Think about people who succeed in the classroom, but they might struggle with standardized tests, or they might have talents that you can't put a grade on.
Oh yeah, that was one of my like biggest pet peeves is like a little bit of a weak description for it, but it always just kind of like broke my heart a little bit to get to know some of these students that I had over the course of a couple of years. And I would know they had so much more than could be quantified or displayed or even explained. Even if they did well on a test, that still is such a minute part of what could define them. And yeah, I could go on a whole different rant on the education system and standardized testing and all of that. But that's a different podcast, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure there are a lot of teachers and other educators who would love to join you. Maybe that's a panel we need.
Yeah.
I would love to hear it because my mom taught kindergarten for 33 years, and in the
bless
last
her heart.
she loves
Kindergarten.
the little ones.
Yeah.
But she said if they would, her quote was, "If they would let me do my job, I would have stayed longer."
Honestly, I have said those exact same words. I remember I loved like teaching. The act of teaching itself, I think, is like such pure joy. I absolutely loved it. It's why I still teach dance. And it makes me happy that I'm still able to provide like sort of a semblance of education and use my teaching skills in that format. But I did language arts and social studies, and it was so much fun because to see, especially in middle school, the development of these more like higher level thought processes and to see students start to really come into their own with their opinions and really define who they are as people, like begin that process is just so exciting. I had a lot of fun with them too because it was before Minecraft had the online education component, which they do now, but I tried bringing in a little bit of like Minecraft into the classroom.
Oh.
I remember there was a unit that I did with the Revolutionary War for 8th graders, and we had one, it was like more of the fun part after the serious stuff was learned. We took examples from Assassin's Creed because they had an Assassin's Creed that dealt with the Revolutionary War, and we took like mini clips and examples of that and started to compare like how is history portrayed in different mediums and like what's accurate, what's not, like what liberties do games take and other mediums take, and that kind of stuff is just so much fun. And I do miss that to some degree.
Yeah, and that's really creative. And I think that's a great way to drive home the lesson because reading it, you get just one dimension of the
Mhm.
lesson. But if you're helping them see it through different media, that's really cool. That
Mm.
I think that's really important. And I
Yeah.
thank you for doing that for them. I'm
Yeah.
sure they appreciated that instead of just
Yeah.
being lectured to.
Well, and it's really fun. And I think even like as adults, it's really cool for us to take kind of those steps back and think about like what are we consuming and how is it how does that the creator of those pieces of art how are they portraying this like historical event or these histories, and how does that differ from either what we've seen in other mediums or our lived experiences or maybe someone that we've talked to who's experienced it. I think I never really played games like Call of Duty or any of those sort of first person like more warfare shooters, but I've always been really intrigued, and part of me wants to try playing them actually, just because I think it's really interesting that those games take stuff that's happening like right now or very very much in our recent history, and kind of see how are we learning about history when we think we're just playing a game, and how
Yeah.
are we molding our opinions on what's happening as we're like consuming this, whether it's subconscious or not. Um,
I think you need to get into academic writing. That sounds
okay.
really cool. I'm serious. That sounds like a really cool thesis going on right now.
I need to write this down before I forget.
Well, don't worry, you can listen to this episode and
Exactly.
we'll
Yeah.
remind you of it. So what made you want to change from education to being a communications manager? What was that transition like?
Um, I mean, I hate to say it because I loved teaching, but I was also just really burnt out. I was really young when I started teaching, and so I think I didn't know how to set, and I'm still learning, but I did not know how to set boundaries in terms of work-life balance. And teaching, very similar to games, is one of those positions where people go into it because they love it. And so as a teacher, I loved my students. I wanted to give them everything. And I did, in the sense that I gave them like all of my time and all of my energy, and other parts of my life were kind of faltering because of it. And so I realized, I was in the process of realizing that when a company reached out to me and they said they had seen my YouTube content, which was very weird for me because I like didn't know anyone was like no one was really watching my YouTube content. And they said, "Hey, we like your videos. Would you like to freelance with us for some time and create content for our company?" And it moved from me freelancing with them kind of in my off teaching hours to gradually becoming part of their team, doing social media streaming and a little bit of like content creation. And that was kind of my stepping stone into the industry. And from there, I just kind of kept going and unfortunately left the education industry, in terms of classroom teaching. But I'm still very passionate about education, and particularly the role of games and media in education.
That's awesome. So were you streaming or posting Let's Plays while you were a teacher on
I
YouTube?
was, yeah, nobody knew it. I I did not tell
Oh, sneaky.
anybody, like least of all my students. My first Let's Play was actually Outlast, which is like the literal opposite. It's for those anyone listening who doesn't know Outlast, it's a horror game that is just absolutely wild. It's like one of the scariest games I've ever played. And it was also the first game that I played because people told me, oh, you should play this scary game. It'll be fun. And um, it was fun, but it was also terrifying. And so I didn't want any of my students to see or watch me playing a horror game that I was like, your parents might not appreciate this. So me doing YouTube was very much like, honestly, just kind of me exploring, like learning how to edit in Photoshop, learning how to edit in Premiere. I also just wanted an excuse to play games. And a friend of mine, he was much more into doing like the YouTube content creation. And he was like, yeah, you should just do it because it's fun. And so I kind of just jumped in because I didn't have anything else to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you start getting into Twitch?
At first, it was a necessity because of that first job that I worked at. Is that it was at a company called Utomic, and they kind of started doing the Game Pass thing like right before Game Pass was the thing, and so with their company, I was creating videos that highlighted different games on the platform, and then I also was streaming. I think it was like 2 or 3 times a week, highlighting games on the platform, and so my Twitch account was actually originally created because I needed to have a account to stream for work, and I didn't do really any personal streams until like probably 6 months in after I was streaming already on their channel, and I was just kind of like, well, I like doing this, so I'll try it on my own.
So how do you like it? What do you like about streaming?
I mean, in this immediate time, in this sort of like in the midst of COVID and being able or being unable to be physically present with people, I think streaming for me has been like a really positive source of social interaction and just like checking in with people. I love the community that has. It's a smaller community, really cozy, and I love that the people in the group that like hangs out in the streams and in the Discord all care about one another, are asking each other how their days went, are checking in about like things that that they knew happened last week and they want to know how it went. So that sense of community, especially when we were initially in that stay-at-home phase and we were all kind of getting used to it, really helped my mental health. And first and foremost, yeah, the community is why I love it. But in addition to that, honestly, it's just really fun. I love indie games. I think now I feel like now everyone's kind of an indie game streamer. But when I was starting, it was still very niche. People were not playing indies to the degree that they are now. And so one of my goals initially was to just have a space where these games that maybe are getting some attention, but not as much as I think they should, have another place where they're just getting highlighted. And so it's always really fun for me to seek out indie games, to find indie games, and like find the ones that people will enjoy watching. I think that's kind of a fun meta game for me in a way.
So what are some of your favorite streaming memories that come to mind?
Oh gosh,
Probably so many.
yeah, there's so many things. I mean, the first one that came to mind actually happened a week ago now, 2 weeks ago, where the community just like there's a thing called a hype train on Twitch where if people like provide bits or subs, it kind of just like raises this sort of fictional digital bar, and people just get like emotes, and it's just like a really fun, energetic time. And I had my first hype train that went to like level 5 for anyone who knows what that means, which was like really exciting, partially because it was a moment where I was like, I don't remember. I think I was just really overwhelmed because I was describing to chat about like how recent events, like starting with George Floyd, but then moving into like everything else that has happened in terms of police brutality. I live in Portland, and so it's something that has like really affected me. It's something that I have been very cognizant of and very like active in trying to bring awareness to. And we were having a discussion there, and not only were people in the chat like being super respectful and like participating in the discussion and also honestly allowing me to just like rant a little bit about it. But they like all came together and decided to do like a hype train, which again, it wasn't as much about like the subs or bits. It was like the fact that they all kind of felt like they wanted to provide support and like be there for me in that way. And I think that was a moment that I like, it was the first time I had felt that kind of a feeling from the community, which was really to that degree, which was really nice. Um, but streaming, I mean, there's so many other fun moments. I stream a lot with a friend of mine, Josh Boykin. His name is Wallstormer Online, and he's the co-founder of IntelliGame, which I occasionally contribute to the podcast and write for. And um, he and I do a lot of dual streams together, and those are always such a blast just because he's just an amazing person and I love playing games with him. And both of us enjoy doing voices for characters in games, so it's always just like an event when we participate together. Um, Gosh, yeah, there's so many. I did the first spicy wings challenge
Oh
this
my
past
gosh.
year to celebrate. We reached a milestone together for followers, and so the promise that I had for them was to do a spicy wings challenge. And so I invited a friend of mine, Chickenfoot. He's another streamer from Portland who I dance with, and we ate spicy wings, and I cried just because it was so hot. So yeah, just
Right. Oh no.
yeah. It was like I wasn't even sad or upset. It was just the tears just kept falling because it was so spicy. So yeah, having events like that are all highlights and moments that I think streaming has provided me that I will never forget. So
And I like that his name is Chickenfoot. You
yeah,
guys ate wings.
yeah. Oh, there were a lot of chicken jokes that night.
Were they, was it like Wingstop's Atomic Wings or Buffalo Wild Wings, whatever their,
So
I forgot their spiciest level.
So we have, I was gonna hand make them, but then I ended up getting too busy and didn't have time. So we have this place in Portland called Fire on the Mountain, and it's like the best wings. If anyone's ever in Portland, go to Fire on the Mountain. They have just good flavors, not just like burn your mouth spicy flavors. And they have a whole like almost veritable rainbow of spice flavors and degrees. And so I just went and I ordered like all of up to the very spiciest spice that they have, and it was spicy. I don't know if I could ever. I mean, I'm sure I'll try something like that again, but I'm gonna just
Oh,
take my time before jumping in.
your your nasal passages must have been cleared
They
after.
were. I was breathing so freely by the next day.
That is
Yeah.
so much fun. I'm sure your followers and subscribers love seeing that level of dedication and just fun from you.
Yeah.
That's a blast. And what about with dancing? That's another way that you get to express yourself. Have you been dancing since you were little?
Um, so it was interesting because I was my mom put me in a ballet class when I was very, very young, like young elementary school. And I remember really loving it, but also the teacher being telling me that I didn't have a future in dance, which was very odd, I think, for a teacher to tell an elementary school child that. Um,
Wow.
which, yeah, that was very harsh. And so that kind of turned me off to dance for a little while. And I did other movement activities, like I was a cheerleader in high school, but I didn't really seriously do dance until I moved back from Alaska, and I was like 25 or 26. So very like in the dance world, that's like quite old to jump in. Most people start when they're in like their elementary or middle school, and they start training and they work up. And I decided I was like I didn't work summers because I was a teacher, so I said, okay, well, in this summer when I'm not doing anything, I'm just gonna dance all day every day. And I took classes. I signed up for a unlimited package at a local studio, and so I pretty much just lived at the studio and tried to absorb as much as I could. And it kind of just took off from there. And I continued to train, continued to participate in different dance companies, and now I teach movement at a couple of studios in Portland.
Wow, I didn't know that you danced until you posted that video a few weeks ago. That
Yeah.
was so cool. I can't dance to save my life, so I am absolutely fascinated whenever people can move that way without breaking anything. That
Yeah. I was
so
gonna say,
what so what is that style described as, or do you do a variety of styles?
So the video that I posted is more of what I would call my style, which is a fusion of a variety of things. Like I found that my choreography tends to be a fusion of various street styles that I've learned, like house, which is like a footwork style, um, whacking, which is a little bit more with a lot more with your arms and sort of showing the music visually through arm movement and rhythm, uh, and a little bit of like hip hop and contemporary training as well. But yeah, when I do my own movement, it just kind of it blends a lot of that together in a really more soft manner. I tend to move very soft and slower, more intentionally in that way. And someone was talking with me actually the other day because we were trying to figure out what we could call my style, and it's like hip hop meets gestural contemporary. Which is like a really weird, ambiguous title, even of itself. But a lot of what I try to do with movement is I have two goals typically. Create a story or a narrative, because I think even if the narrative is like having fun, I think movement has to really like advanced movement has to have intention behind it. It has to have some sort of like meaning and depth besides just like moving to the beat. And then I also try to create movement that illustrates the music visually. And so for me, it's really important to listen to the music a lot and not just like do what feels good personally, but also find the sounds in the music. And if I can make a person hear a noise in a song that they didn't hear prior, but when they saw it, they finally connected that movement to the sound, that for me is like the really exciting part of creating choreography.
Oh gosh, that sounds really cool. Yeah, because whenever you were doing certain movements, it
Mm-hmm.
connected with those particular sounds. So that's really
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah.
I bet that's a great stress relief too.
It is. It's really nice to have like I call it my lazy hobby, even though it's not lazy to have a hobby that's video games. But video games is more sedentary, and so it's really nice to have that duo of having dance and movement for me to feel very present in my body and to sort of be physical in my body, and then also have video games, which in a different way allows me to um, reflect and like not be outside of my body, but it puts me into another world that allows me to like think about things in ways that I haven't before. So it's a really nice juxtaposition.
Do you like dance video games?
I do. I have, especially since again we've been staying at home and the gym's been closed and uh, we haven't been able to go out and do things. I've been playing a lot of Just Dance. I love Beat Saber. I don't have it set up because my PlayStation controllers broke, my Move controllers broke, but like Beat Saber is wonderful. So rhythm games and any sort of musical games, I'm a very big fan of.
Did you do a lot of DDR when it was at the height
I
of its
I
popularity?
wish I loved DDR so much. So the only arcade that had it where I was growing up, it cost like it was just like at least $1 per song or something like
Oh,
that. It was like it was just more expensive than my mom was willing to provide money for. And so I would every time we could go, it was a huge treat. But I never got as good at DDR as I would have liked because we never got to go as frequently as I would want.
that's expensive. $1 per song.
Yeah, I feel
Gosh.
and maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was like $1 per like round or something, but I also wasn't good enough, as a kid to always succeed. And so if
Mhm.
you fail the song, you have to pay up again. So
Yeah, I wonder if they're still around. I haven't been able to really get to any malls or arcades lately, but
yeah.
that is challenging.
Yeah, there's a arcade here in Portland that has, or at least the other part is a lot of places maybe don't maintain the cabinets as much as they
Mm.
could. And so I remember there's an arcade here in Portland, but I would go and see if there was DDR, and it was always down for some repair or something else. And so I
Oh,
kind of got bummed. And yeah, I haven't tried, but hopefully we can open that back up again.
I hope so. But what were some of your earliest gaming memories? I'm sure they go way back.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I mean, games were kind of always, even before I was playing them, I remember like my dad having like the super old Windows computer and like he would play games on that. And I think, gosh, my first gaming experience was with the Super Nintendo. I think we got it for our birthday or some, so it was a holiday kind of event. Games were always like a holiday or birthday kind of gift. And so I think my dad just wanted to get the Super Nintendo for himself, and so he got it for me and my brother, me and my brother, and yeah, playing like Mario on the Super Nintendo, playing like Mario Paint, and then of course like sort of the classics of Chrono Trigger and Breath of Fire and Secret of Mana. Like all of those games were just integral to my childhood, and like even like learning how to read with some of the games and learning vocabulary from some of the games. Yeah, playing with my brother is like the earliest memory I have of playing video games. So it's very, very good stuff.
Oh, that's a great point about vocabulary. I don't think a lot of naysayers realize just how important that is in video games, especially adventures, RPGs. But I learned a
Yes.
lot of vocabulary even from Paper Mario games.
Right. There's so much, especially yeah, in RPGs and like even nowadays with games like Skyrim or and The Witcher, any like very lore heavy type of game. I mean, kids are playing this. They're learning how to read. They're being encouraged to read because they love the lore of the world and they want more. And like I can't even count how many times I would like pause a game to look up a word because I didn't really know what the characters were talking about and learn lots of different words from that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I know. Come on, guys, let your kids play games. They will learn.
Exactly.
So, what is it like at Rose City Games now that you've
Yeah.
been playing video games for a while and now
Yeah.
you get to work with video games? Do you want to tell us about that journey?
Yeah, it's so Rose City Games is my second like full-time job, I guess, in in the industry. The first was with Utomic, that company. I did a lot of side freelancing and side gigs for a variety of other smaller companies. But then Rose City is the first time I've had another like full-time, like this is the one studio I'm working for kind of job. It's really wonderful. I love all of the people there. I think what's really nice is before I was working from home and contracting and freelancing, and I had missed that feeling of being in an office with other people and missed that sense of collaboration. And so Rose City, at the time when I was freelancing, I was at PAX West like 2 years ago, and Corey, one of the co-founders there, we saw each other at an event. We knew we were both from Portland, and offhand, he was just like, "Oh, are you looking for any jobs closer to home? Because we're looking for someone, but you know, we should talk when we get back to Portland." And at the time, I was kind of wanting to look for something closer to home, but I didn't know how secure a job at a game studio would be because a lot of times, especially for community managers and community folks, like you're kind of the last one hired, first one fired, or let go, um, and just the indie industry it can be very volatile depending on who is running the studio, situations just in the greater context of the world. You hear about studios going under quite a bit, and so I was a little bit apprehensive. But after a few months, we talked again, and after talking with Will and Corey, the co-founders, I was very reassured, not just with like the type of games that they were making, but the fact that they had like really good long-term plans for the studio and like where it was going to go and their hopes for it, not just beyond one game, but multiple games out. So yeah, since then I've been working with Rose City. I think July was actually my 1 year anniversary, which is
Oh,
wild.
congratulations.
Yeah, and it's a title change, but I'm now doing like more officially communications versus just community because I'm doing like a lot more of like the marketing and higher level stuff in terms of planning campaigns for the games and not just interacting with community, which is really cool.
So, what is a day in the life of a communications manager for a video game company like? Do you have a routine? Is there anything that's pretty typical, or does it kind of change day to day, week to
Yeah.
week?
Um, so, and this is for Rose City. I think each studio, depending on if they have multiple people on the team for communications versus not, that'll change. For me, week to week, it could be very different what I'm working on. So just depending on what's happening with the games that we're trying to promote. Um, Usually, the routine that I do have is every morning I'll get up, we get onto Discord, and we all check in with one another. And I just do sort of housekeeping emails for usually the first hour, hour and a half of my day, just to like ease into things.
Mhm.
But after that, depending on if we have events, I may be doing a lot of event planning, submitting different assets and interviews for the events themselves. We just got done with like Indie Arena booth and also like the Indie, what is it? Indie World Direct that Nintendo put on just a couple weeks ago. Sometimes I'm working on just social media, kind of filling the social coffers with gifts and little things so that people can see the progress we're making. And sometimes I'm helping edit trailers or writing pitch decks for different platforms or games. And yeah, so it kind of just depends on where we're at, which I think for some folks could be it's overwhelming because there is a lot happening and it can happen kind of fast. I personally find it very enjoyable because I tend to get bored a little bit easily, I think, if I just do the same thing day in and day out. So for me, it's exciting because it kind of provides me with like the sense that there's always something at least new that I get to learn or new on the horizon.
That is awesome. That's a good point. I'm sure it could get pretty stale if it were
Mhm.
super predictable day in and day out.
Hmm.
And I don't think you can be that way in a video game company.
No, and I think I really wish there was an element, like I sometimes wish that I could specialize. Like I think I have friends who really specialize in like social media and they are just like so talented at what they do. And I have friends who specialize in like specifically event planning and making sure events like run perfectly. And I think sometimes I wish, oh, I could specialize and just focus on one thing and just become really strong at it. But I think at least with my personality type, I'm very much I love to be a jack of all trades, master of none, I suppose. Just because I think I just need that kind of like variety for my personal happiness.
That's really cool, though. That I think it's rewarded you in many ways
Hmm.
that you have dabbled in different types of talents and you have so many different skills.
Yeah, yeah, I like it.
That's awesome. Well, if someone listening to this is thinking, gosh, I would like to be a communications manager or work
Mm.
with a video game company, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the podcast, while there are now degrees and tracks that you can take to become a community manager, you can take to become someone who works on the communication side of the game industry. Um, I don't think that's necessary. I think if someone is interested in becoming part of the game industry in this capacity, honestly, what's lovely is that you can just kind of jump in to an extent. If you already are a fan of a game, like participate enough and eventually you can become a mod, like organize forums on your own. I think a lot of what community management is just being in spaces and helping people feel welcome and being like that helping hand. And um, you can get that experience already without having a degree, without having anything special, as long as you have access to the communities that you enjoy. So more than any other position in the game industry, I think communications and community are nice because yeah, degrees don't really hold as much weight. They're nice to haves, but really it's your experience and your ability to learn and flexibility and adaptability that helps. If you are really serious, I would encourage you to check out, like, I think Coursera and other free, like, I forget, like Udemy. I think there are free videos and courses online that you don't have to pay for, that you can take, that will provide you with additional, more academic marketing and community education. And I would say if you're really interested in getting into this area, in conjunction with that experience, to give you that sort of maybe test to see if you really do want to do community, because it can be emotionally draining at times. Taking some of those free courses and watching those free videos is more than enough help to kind of get you kickstarted into the roles.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people are going to find that very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are some of the challenges of being a community manager? I'm sure, like with any job, it's not always happy. It's not always exciting.
I think the nature of the internet is that it is always on. And so at any given point in time, depending on the sort of the reach that your game has and the reach that your community has, people may expect you to be up and active and ready to respond to their questions at any moment. And that can be draining, because I remember when I started initially, the pressure for me to be constantly online so I could like do my job well was just omnipresent. I felt like I had to be online all the time. And it was not unlike when I was a teacher, where I felt like I had to be there for my students all the time so that they could always have, like, they knew that I was there. So yeah, one of the biggest challenges in community and in games or any passion industry in general is setting those expectations, setting the boundaries, and making sure that you are clear and that you enforce them. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, or it was for me at least when I was starting in the industry. Now it's still a work in progress, but I feel like it is a lot easier if you set those expectations from the get-go. Like, people in the community pretty much know that after about 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific, I probably won't be on Discord and I probably won't respond until the next business day. They know that weekends, we're human, so we need weekends. And so those kind of even just like time boundaries are so important, but can feel challenging to set because you want to feel like everyone knows you're there for them. The other challenge is, in many cases, people on the internet don't connect accounts with the humans behind them, for better or worse. And so what's unfortunate is sometimes there will be people who address community managers or address people who create games in general without acknowledging that they're not just game making machines, they're actually humans. And so being prepared to have that happen can be it's a mental challenge all in of itself. Being prepared to understand how to like de-escalate, divert, or just like address directly if someone is being unaware in that way is really, really important. So there's a lot of like emotional knowledge that has to go into being a community manager or anyone on communications. And I think that kind of emotional toll is something that folks maybe aren't aware of in the initial parts of their job or initial parts of going into community, which is why I really think it's important for folks who are interested to really participate in the communities that they're interested in as moderators or as like leaders in those communities, to get a taste, because it can be very draining.
I can imagine it. Kind of like, in a way, it reminds me a little bit of someone who's having a problem calling a customer service representative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that poor person is on the receiving end of that customer's rage.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I half joke that community folks are like the tanks of the, if everyone has a class in this game studio, the tank is the community manager, because many times we are on the front lines and we are absorbing feedback, critique, compliments. It's not all bad. What's really lovely is we are the first often to see or hear the good things that people have to say. And that's great because I love getting to like send that back or send, links to fan art for our team. And that's anyone who's listening who has ever been complimentary of a game towards a community person or to a brand account, like, thank you. It's always really like, it's very heartening to see and hear what people do when they enjoy your titles. But yeah, it's like we are the tanks. We are on the front lines, like making sure that the people who are making the game kind of have that stuff filtered a little bit before it gets to them.
That's a really great analogy. I like that. That's really fierce.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And so with Rose City Games, you recently, I'm sure you guys saw her, she was on the Nintendo Indie Showcase.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that experience?
Yeah, that was like really cool for me. So the indie showcase that Nintendo had featured just a small group of indie games that were both releasing that day on the Nintendo Switch, as well as announcing for the first time that they were going to come to the Switch. And so one of the games that our studio is working on is called Garden Story, and we've been announced for Steam for quite some time, so people on the PC and Mac can play the games on the computer. But people have been asking us ever since announcing the game whether or not it was coming to Nintendo, and we hadn't been able to say anything for ages. And so it was so exciting to have Garden Story participate in the Direct, not just because we are finally able to talk about the fact that it's coming to the Switch, and we're very excited about it, but they asked to have someone from the team talk about it and kind of introduce the game. And so Picogram, the developer of the game, began our video segment with just a word from them talking about the game. And then I got to be also part of that segment on camera, talking a little bit more about just the game itself. So yeah, it was really cool. I got calls from people who I hadn't talked to in years who were like, I was watching the Nintendo event and I think that was you. It had your name on that. What's happening? So that was really cool. It was like a mini moment where people, I think, were like, oh, that's what Jenny does. She does video games. Because a lot of people who aren't in the game industry, I think, sometimes don't quite understand what my job entails.
That was so epic. Oh, I was so excited when I saw you all watching it because you had mentioned Garden Story on the women's panel, but then it's to see it coming to fruition like that. That was incredible.
Yeah, Pico is an incredible developer. What they're doing, like it's exactly the game that I would want to play and purchase and promote even if I wasn't part of the studio. And so having this be my job is something that I'm very like honored to just be able to do. Because yeah, Garden Story is kind of exactly the type of game that I think the world needs a little bit more of. So
Would you like to share a little bit about it for people who aren't familiar?
That would probably be
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I was realized people who are listening maybe not know what Garden Story is. So Garden Story is a game about a grape named Concord, and they are the guardian of their village, which is called, not just a village, of an area called the Grove. And there are multiple villages in the Grove, and each of them has their own struggle that they're working through. And so as the guardian, you're going to be traversing the areas, figuring out how to help each individual, how to help the villages, and really foster community in your space. And there's a larger sort of problem or not quite mystery, but there's a larger issue of a rot that is starting to invade and sort of destroy the grove. And so guardians like Concord are going to have to sort of figure out how to work together or not guardians, I guess guardian and neighbors are going to have to work together to like figure out how to solve this problem. But yeah, it's just a really cozy game. I think anyone who enjoys Zelda, actually, the gameplay is very Zelda-like. Anyone who enjoys games like Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley. There's like light sim aspects to it too. So it's a very cozy game, but it's also quite an action-packed game as well.
I love that the
Yeah.
character's name is Concord.
I know. All of the characters have names that tie in with either the type of fruit or vegetable or fungi that they are, whether it's like they're, something like Concord or like a more scientifically based name that maybe isn't as overt, but is fun to look up. So,
Oh, I can't wait. That one is on my list. It looks
yay!
absolutely precious. What are some of the other games you've worked on?
The other game that we're currently working on in studio is called Floppy Nights, which is really wonderful. Garden Story is unique because as Rose City Games, we are the publisher. So we have a slightly different role in that we're just promoting the game and Picogram is doing all of the development. With Floppy Nights, we're developing that in-house. And so it's been really exciting. That one is a really fun mashup of strategy and tactics games with like light deck building or card game mechanics. So instead of like with strategy games, oftentimes you have characters that you move around a board, almost like a chess game.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taking that, but taking also the fact that instead of each character having their own movement specifically, you have a deck of cards that will help you decide what to take, what actions to take on the board. And that one is about a duo named Phoebe and Carlton. Phoebe is a teenager, and Carlton is her robotic arm that has a sort of consciousness. And they have a very fun, like humorous sort of dialogue back and forth because they're best friends and they're both a little bit sassy. And initially, the game is about Phoebe trying to, like win the science fair and earn enough money to get out of her parents' place because she's tired of living with them. But like in many games, something greater is happening where Phoebe has found herself in a role that's becomes more and more that of a hero in the community versus just someone who wants to earn money and kind of think only for herself. So,
Oh, that's really cool.
yeah.
And do you have an idea of when that one is coming out or?
No official release date yet for that one.
Okay.
But yeah, we're really excited. We're trucking along. And yeah, I'm actually excited. Today I'll be playing an updated build on it, and I think it's going to be really
Oh,
good.
that one looks so cute. I went to its Twitter page and
hmm
so when you say deck building, is that kind of like the Yu-Gi-Oh games?
Yeah, or if anyone's familiar with like Slay the Spire or yeah, like Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon in the sense that you have cards that you put down to do different actions, and you have like a set limit of like energy or points or mana. What each game calls it something different, but you have a set number of points so that you can only put down a specific combo of cards. Yeah, the game itself is more of a tactics game, and we didn't want it to be too heavy on the deck building mechanics because that can get really complex for folks. And so does tactic games, actually. Those two genres I think are really interesting because like tactics games and deck building games have very niche but very dedicated audiences who are so good at that genre. But it can be intimidating for anyone who has not played. Like, I sort of play tactics games, but I'm very casual with it. I've never really gotten into deck building games like Magic or anything like that
Mhm.
because uh, for me, it's just very intimidating. There's just so many possible combinations. I just kind of, it overwhelms me a little bit, even though I enjoy the mechanics of the game. So with Floppy Nights, one of the main goals was not just to create a game that has this like fun mashup of two genres we love, but also to make them feel very accessible and much more quick than I think they do on their own. Tactics games, sometimes you'll do a battle for a couple of hours. Like I've done, in a Fire Emblems or, some one of those tactics games, like I'll spend an hour or two battling and trying to get through a boss and then like failing by the end of it, and having all my characters die. And it's the worst feeling in the world. And so we wanted the tactics to be fun, but not take as long as a traditional tactics game. And we really loved card game elements of having like a specific hand and limited numbers of points that you could use and fun combos that you can create. But we didn't want it to be deck building in the sense of this really intense sort of system where you have to like really plan out like what cards you have in your deck. It's a much lighter version of that. So
it's pretty approachable for anybody, even if you don't have
yes.
any deck building
Yes,
experience.
absolutely. Yeah, it's 100%. I was like one of the big testers at the start of it because I am very unfamiliar with any kind of blend of both of those genres, and I was able to figure it out. So I feel like most people could.
Okay, that makes me feel better because I've never played Magic the Gathering and I
Yeah.
never played Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! I just remember the anime.
Yeah, and I think true deck building games are really cool because of like the fact there are so many cards and there's just the breadth of like possibilities. It's really exciting, but it requires so much time investment, I think, for people to who want to like maximize their ability in that. It's a huge time investment. And it can seem, yeah, that learning curve just is very, very steep. And so we did not want that. So, yeah, it's like more tactics with like light card game elements, I would say.
That sounds really cool. I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see both the Garden Story and Floppy Nights come out.
Yeah.
I'm sure those are keeping you guys very busy right now.
Yes, yeah, having to, I am constantly amazed at folks in studios who have more than 2 or 3 games at a time. I mean, there are like Kitfox is one studio that comes to mind. They have I mean, they've got to be close to 10 games. I feel like that they're working on or that they're doing. I don't know, maybe not 10, but I feel like Kitfox is an example of a studio that is constantly just. I feel like they're working on so many games, and just I have messaged Victoria many times before. Like, I don't know how you do it because with 2 games, I'm already just kind of at my good limit.
Oh gosh, maybe next year you guys will have 10 games.
Oh my gosh. We shall see. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing.
We'll give you a break. Don't
Yeah.
worry. Don't we won't say that right now. We won't put that
Yeah.
out into the universe. But so in addition to playing video games and dancing, do you have any other hobbies that you enjoy, like cooking or reading or
Yeah.
writing anything?
Oh my gosh, I love reading. I wish I had more time to do it. I feel like reading is one of those things where I always want to do it like right before bed, but then by the time I get to bed, I just kind of zonk out as soon as my head hits the pillow. Um, I really love like being outside. I love to run, jog. I guess I don't run very fast, so it's more of a jog. I enjoy being outside, being in nature. I think the older I'm not very old, but the older I get, the more I appreciate time away from the computer,
Mhm.
and time in sort of like things that are really, that feel very tangible to me. So like going out on hikes, um, doing things like I do a lot of cross stitch and like crafting in that way, felting. For me, it's just really nice to create something that's tangible. And so, yeah, I think those are my 2 other like big interests besides dance and video games is like being outside in nature, crafting. I mean, eating, if that counts. I love finding food, just like finding good places to eat. So yeah, just trying to find ways to be disconnected from technology when I can.
It's hard. It
Hmm.
is hard because like you were saying, with setting the boundaries, even when
Hmm.
it's not related to your job. Like I've had to put on do not disturb for text messages because I have some night owl friends in a group chat and just they want to
Yes,
talk about random stuff, and I cannot have that going off while I'm
exactly.
asleep. But since you mentioned food, we love to ask people what are some of your favorite
Oh
snacks or meals
my
or
gosh.
beverages? Always
Hmm.
kimchi.
I know. I was gonna say definitely kimchi. Like just Korean barbecue, where you just you have like slices of meat that you cook over basically like a open grill kind of situation. It's like my all-time favorite meal because I associate that in particular. You don't typically do Korean barbecue by yourself. Usually it's with a group of people, your family, your friends, and The pieces in Korean culture, pieces of food are usually cut into like bite size because it's considered a little bit more polite. You don't want to be like, you don't want to have like huge chunks of food that you're trying to grapple with or like cut through. It's just good to like have everything be bite size, and it's really easy to also like take pieces to put on other people's plates and like share and show that consideration. And so for me, Korean barbecue is like not just the meal itself, which is delicious because it's got like there's just a variety of flavors with your protein, you've got rice, you've got kimchi, you've got lettuce, you've got side dishes, but it's just a really communal experience that I very much enjoy. So that's probably my favorite meal of all time. Um, but my goodness, I love sushi, I love boba, I love uh, pastries, carbs. Like,
Doesn't like carbs.
I know, it's really like I am not a picky eater at all. I suppose, except for ginger. I actually very much dislike the taste of like ginger, wasabi, and licorice. I think those are the sort of triforce of just foods that I will not. I
They're
will not.
strong tasting foods.
They are. I think it's just something about them, even though they taste different, something about them all are very similar to me and sort of the like, yeah, intensity of the flavor. So if it's not those three, I will most likely enjoy it and eat it.
Oh, I love boba tea. You said that, and it's been so
Mhm.
long since I've had it because
Yeah.
yeah, we don't really have any places around here where I
Hmm.
live that do it, except in the big cities. And there are aspects I'm enjoying about staying at home because I do like that
Right.
focus on what's important, but I do miss, going places and feeling comfortable.
Yep, I agree. We have, fortunately, where I live, we have a really prominent sort of like East Asian Pacific Islander community, and so it's been really. What's been really nice is even though we can't necessarily go into places to eat, I've been able to still like have some really good food and access to really good food through taking out or calling in and like picking things up. So that's been very, very good.
Yes, you seem very zen.
Uh,
I want that level of calm.
I appreciate you saying that. I think it comes and goes. It comes and goes.
Oh, I
Yeah.
understand. It's technology is great, but this is something I've talked about with my coworkers where we have a really good work-life balance. I am almost never contacted after office hours, and I've been working from home. But in a way, you do have to establish boundaries because if
Mhm.
you answer emails at 9 o'clock at night, people are going to subconsciously think, oh, they're available
Yep.
this time.
Yep. Yeah. And it's really interesting because yeah, I think since we're all at home, like I joke about this quite frequently, but time is a really interesting thing because if you're not going to different spaces, if you're not seeing different faces of people, like time does kind of go into this weird, like it either slows down or it speeds up, and you kind of don't know what time it is sometimes because you're in the same space for so long. And so I think in terms of setting boundaries, what I've been trying to do, especially since now it's a little bit more okay if you're wearing a mask, like go out for walks or just like not be inside the house the whole day. I've been very much trying to break up not only the day in terms of doing different activities, but also making sure that those activities are in different spaces. So it feels just a little bit more differentiated.
That's a great point. That's a
Yeah.
good way to look at it and a good way to approach it because sometimes you just have to get out safely, wear your
Yep.
mask and everything, but it's I think it's getting to a lot of people, and like you were
Yeah.
saying with Garden Story, we do need some soft, wholesome games because
Hmm.
I think whenever people are stressed, that can start eating away and causing some other negative issues and
Yeah.
emotions. And I think we all need to be there for one another. We're all dealing
Yeah.
with it.
I agree. I think one thing that's really it's been something I've been reflecting on quite a bit is um, community in this day and age because while I love like the digital communities that I'm a part of, the digital communities that I fostered, and I think it's really important that we are present in that digital space for each other, because those are valid and real relationships. I also think it's been really interesting to reflect on community, like in our physical locations. I was, as I've been like walking around the neighborhood more, I've like actually started seeing my neighbors, which is honestly very, very, I felt kind of bad, because I realized like we've been living in this house for about a year now, and I had really only seen my neighbors when we maybe parked our cars at the same time, or they're out working on their yard, and we have never really introduced ourselves to one another. It's very like very insular within our own houses. And so I think, especially nowadays, I've been thinking of ways that we can take care of each other, not just our digital communities, but how we can also make sure we're taking care of people in our physical communities, and like starting to check in and get to know one another. Just because, yeah, I was thinking like, I didn't know them before this, and now we're waving and saying hi, but yeah, it's very interesting.
I know. I hope those are some of the more positives that we see from all this, that we are kinder to those closest to us. And it is interesting, the shift. It's one of those things where you don't want it to be one extreme where your neighbors are
Right.
bothering you at all
Right,
hours
exactly.
while you're trying to work on something, or just relax, take a nap.
Hmm.
But we also don't want to be strangers, and
Hmm.
that's that's one reason I hope that we can have a safe Halloween with trick or treating where I
Yeah,
live. You know,
yeah.
that sense of community, and that just warms my heart, just seeing kids and families gather together and, hey, here's some candy. And
Mhm.
I don't know, we'll have to see
Yeah,
what's happening by October.
right. Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting fall season for sure. But what is nice, like you said, is this whole thing is allowing people to like take a step back and reflect and find ways to be there for one another in ways that are really great. Um, yeah, I think I don't want to be, it's you don't want to trivialize the things that are happening, but at the same time, it is nice to see that there is that little bit of positivity that's coming from it, and hopefully it'll sustain through and past all the stuff happening now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, Kimchica, is there anything else you'd like to share about any hobbies, your job, dancing, food?
Oh my gosh. I don't think so. This was like a really comprehensive and fun conversation. It's been really cool, like just getting the opportunity to reflect on like how I got into the space and sort of where I'm headed in a lot of ways has been really cool. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for taking the time to meet with me and share your stories. I know it's crazy right now. And if are there any other projects or panels you'd like to mention that are coming up that people can follow?
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, so PAX Online is happening soon. It's happening, I think it's from September 12th through the 20th. And so if anyone is able to and is interested, I have a PAX panel that's happening for PAX Online. It's called Beyond 101, Representation in Indies, the Industry, and Beyond. And it's a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. I think games, over the summer, we've had a lot of sort of reckonings um, with with the Me Too movement in the games industry, with representation, and how the games industry interacts with people of color and with race in the game industry. And so um, there are a lot there. I think there are at least like 10 to 15 panels that I screenshotted that all address different marginalized groups and voices, and talks about like where we can go. And I'm excited to say that my panel is one of those that is going to explore how, as an industry, we can move beyond just like the 101 levels of representation, and just like, having just one person of color on your team, or, a woman be the protagonist in game. Like, that's all well and good, but how can we move past that? And so in the panel, which is pre-recorded because everything's digital now and getting pre-recorded, we start off by doing a little bit of an intro on representation in industry. We highlight things that we are excited about that we're seeing. But we also provide, I think, some really great examples of areas we still see a lot of improvement needed, as well as specific actions people can take, whether they're in a game studio, whether they're a consumer, whether they're just in the game space in other capacities, things that we can do to help like sustainably make our industry better and more inclusive.
Thank you guys for doing that. I'm really happy that y'all are sharing that important message.
Yeah, the panelists are Josh Boykin, who goes by @Ballstormer, Kara Hillstock, who goes by @Cheritomo, Victoria Tran @the VTran, and Tanya Ken, who goes by Vivid Foundry. And all of them are phenomenal people and just people who I very much respect, and was so honored that they they took the time to participate. So yeah, anyone interested, if they visit my Twitter, it's up there. They also visit the PAX website, and it's on the schedule for Sunday, September 20th.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, this episode should release before that, so people should have some time to get that out. So that makes me so excited. I'm glad that you guys are doing that. Thank you for sharing that. I don't think a lot of people realize just how important representation is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and it's one of those things, I think, where we have seen improvement in some aspects, but there is still a really long way to go. I think one of the first major sort of topics I remember hearing about at I think it was actually my first PAX years ago, was about women in the game industry. And what's really cool, and we did a panel on this as well, not too long ago. And I think what's really great is, like, right now, a lot of folks we have been talking about women participating in the industry. But I think there are more facets to that. People of color, women of color, versus like I think we've only scratched the surface on really getting into what we can be doing, versus just sort of this surface level of, oh, well, we've got a few folks here that check our boxes, and we are diverse. Let's wrap it up. We're good. So yeah, I think there's a lot more discussion to be had. And I'm just very happy that these folks were able to participate and help keep that discussion going.
Me too. I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kimchica. Where can people find you online?
I am on Twitter at Kimchica25, and on Twitch and YouTube just /Kimchica. So pretty easy to find if you're looking for me.
Awesome, thank you. And I am with Boss Rush Games and Another Zelda podcast. You can find us on Twitter, YouTube, and your podcast of choice. And I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at Fairy Crypt. Well, thank you again, Kimchica. I really appreciate your taking the time, and I hope that you continue to stay safe and healthy, and we'll get through this year.
We will. Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much again for having me and being like you have such a calming presence.
Oh, listen, you have a calming presence. Maybe it's because of you. I'm getting the energy. I'm getting a calming vibe.
Yeah, so thank you. This is really, really great. And yeah, anytime I can work with y'all, I will take it, because y'all are great people.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I'm still fairly new, but I'm enjoying it. It's been a bright spot, like you said, looking for the bright spots in 2020. This is one of them.
Yay!
Sure.
That's good.
Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you guys later. Bye, guys.